What up, guys? It's K-Broad here. I'm going to make this fast because I'm infamous for going way too long. We are at the end of the 2026 bear market. Not necessarily at the end of the 2026 crypto winter, because there will be some consolidation needed, but we're very likely, probabilistically, at the end of the worst part of it, which I would call the bear. And we're going to talk about what that looks like and why and what happens next. Here we go. We're on the Bitcoin weekly chart. All these lines, I'm very excited. I'm going to do an update, one more update later in the spring. We're going to clear off all these old lines. It's going to be great. It's going to be a celebration. But for now, we got to get to business. So let's take a look at what happens at bear market bottoms as it pertains to my custom indicator, which is entered manually and will not be disclosed until we're at new all-time highs. Maybe I'll give it to you guys for the 2030 bear market. Okay, where is my indicator on the chart? It is these vertical green lines. One here, and one back in the 2014 bear market. Or sorry, one here at COVID, which works, but that's not our base case. This is not COVID. One in 2022, one in 2018, and one in 2014. It is back tested perfectly, and everything else is playing out in 2026 exactly the same. So I look forward to it ringing up here. Not perfectly, not history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So here we go. After we get this indicator, which I am doing a little napkin math, but it should fire off. The earliest it could fire off traditionally is the week of the Monday the 16th, so the 16th through the 23rd. It's on a weekly basis because it's not about getting into the nitty-gritty of the daily for this indicator. So in about 2 weeks, we should see the indicator. So this is what it will look like. Oops, that's dotted, but whatever. That's what it will look like. I'm not putting it on the chart yet because I'm not doing this prematurely, but that's what it will look like. And I would estimate, based on the rate of change in the calculations I do for the indicator, it should hit Monday the 16th, possibly the week after. And when it fires off, I will let everybody know. Whether it's here in a short video or Discord, that remains to be seen. So, before we dive back into history, take a look at what we're looking at here. We called the breakdown from the 50-week EMA. We said what would happen, the 100-week EMA. We said what would happen when Bitcoin did that. Called this whole drop. Yada yada yada. That was in the Discord because I haven't made videos. What comes next? We got this what is currently looking like textbook definition of a capitulation wick on this week. So keep a brain image, a mental image of what this looks like, and let's go back in time. Let me turn off. We don't need the wave trend right now. We don't really need. I guess we'll keep RSI up just for kicks and giggles. Okay, venture back in time. Here we go. We're on the weekly chart. We're going back to the 2014 bear market, which the indicators actually fire off in January 15 of the subsequent year because that's just when the timing worked out. But we're going to call this the 2014 bear market because, as we know, Bitcoin is on a 4-year cycle that has been demonstrably reproven against all odds in 25, 26. So here we have the capitulation wick. This was a breakdown from the 100-week EMA. Bitcoin went. Keep in mind, this is 2014, so volatility was different. Levels were a little different. It took a little bit longer, but the same thing happened. Once Bitcoin demonstrably lost the 100-week EMA, it began its plunge. So we're just starting with that as the base. We're accepting that this is exactly the same as every other major bear market. So here's the capitulation wick and candle from Bitcoin, which is exactly what we look like today. The RSI, actually, it's a good thing I left the RSI up because the RSI was indeed finally oversold on the weekly here on the capitulation wick, same as it's oversold right now if I were to scroll back. So what happens next? Keeping in mind that this was earlier Bitcoin, markets have changed, and volatility was different, but the week immediately following was green. It was a large green. It was a straight up reversal. Call it a partial tweezer candle, but it was green. And so, um, yeah, that's kind of it. It's just it was green. Just keep that in mind. The week after the green is when the indicator finally fired off. Now, once the indicator fires off, there are no more new lows, at least not demonstrably. So you've got the low of the indicator week. So just to back up quickly, after the green bounce week, it was a red week. This just so happened to be the week when the indicator fires off. It moves around, but the indicator fired off. This put in a weekly low of, what is it up there? 211. And the next week was a low of 210. So, wow, shoot me. But basically, once the indicator's in, the low is in until the next move completes. And we'll talk about that in a second. But here we go. So capitulation wick, green, of which you'll see the amplitude varies and the shape of it varies going forward. Green, which will be next week. And then one or two red candles, whatever it takes to get the indicator. And then the low is in before the next move. In this case, keeping in mind the higher volatility of earlier 2014 Bitcoin, we'll switch to the daily candle for this, and my charts got messed up because I didn't put on the hold the left time frame option. Sorry. Okay, we're back in 2014. So here's the week where the indicator fires off. Let me put on the EMA so we can get kind of a good look. So the indicator, so here's the green week going up into the indicator candle week, which was red, puts in some lows. Here's 211, here's 210. After that, I'll go back out to the weekly after I explain this move. After the red weeks, revisit the capitulation wick, the midpoint of it essentially. And I'll show you that on the weekly one more time. But once the red weeks are in and the indicator has fired off, Bitcoin made its swift move, first of all, to the 50-day EMA. And then with this higher volatility environment, Bitcoin would actually go on to the 100-day, which was substantially higher. It went up another, 10, 15% into the 100-day EMA, which is where it started to peter out. At that point, that was the end of this. I don't know what to quite call this move. It's not, I guess it's a dead count bounce, but not really, because the cat's actually coming back to life. So it's kind of like the living cat bounce, the LCB. And we'll see more of those in just a moment. So it came up to the 100-day in about a month from when these final red week candles were put in following the indicator. So now that you've seen this, again, Bitcoin after these red weeks goes to the 50-day, and in fact, in this earlier environment, it went all the way up to the 100-day, and then it started to slide into what we typically consider the back half of crypto winter, which is where people get, because it's going to come back down, people get despondent, maybe even angry again because they think this was a dead cat bounce. It in some years, as I'll show you, it may put in a new low. It's still just the back half of winter, guys, because once we get a different indicator, I'll show you around here, it's just straight up. We'll be on the weekly chart when I show you this because this is silly, but it's silly to look at on the daily. But basically, it's crypto winter. It's boredom. It's despondency. It's anger. It's confusion. In 2014, there was another low, which probably really broke people. And then that was it. We get a long signal, and it was off to the races. So let's go back out to the weekly to show you, again, what these looked like, these final red weeks into the 50-day EMA / 100-day EMA move. So that way you'll have something to sort of base this off of in the 2018 and 2022 markets that I'll go over. So here, capitulation wick, green week, red week, which happens to be the indicator where the low for the time being is put in on this wick, and then you see just green, 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 green with a couple of scary, wicks upwards, but in general, green up into, this is the 50-day EMA and the 100-week EMA. And then after that, a little bit of winter. Okay, so that's the shape of it. Keep this in mind. These red weeks did revisit down the capitulation candle, which is why it's important to see where this week closes, because we're in what should be the capitulation candle. So this one, because it had a pretty massive recovery tweezer candle in the subsequent green week, this only really came down to test these lows right here are, the close of the capitulation candle. So that should be our base case if this is the kind of shaped bounce week we get. We may not get back below the close of this particular candle. Okay, so we've seen what the shape of this should look like. You're going to see it again, I promise. I want to move quickly. We're not going to talk about this long signal. That'll be a different video. We're not going to talk about either long signal, actually. That's for a different video. So let's go to 2018. Da-da-da. Okay, Bitcoin loses the 100-week EMA, plunges. Here is our capitulation. Let me turn off these volume candles because these are getting in the way. Here's our capitulation wick. Does this shape look familiar? Did we just not see this in 2014? We get a capitulation candle down. We get a green week. Now, in this case, Bitcoin is a little bit more matured, and all it is a spinning top, somewhat of a doji candle. You'd almost call it an indecision candle in any other context. So we have the green week following the capitulation. It's, it goes wildly up, wildly down, but still green by a little bit. And so there's the green week. Keep in mind, we have not gotten the indicator yet. The indicator's not flashed, which means lows are not only still possible, but should be the base case. What happens after the green bounce week? Red. And not just red, but all the way back down to the capitulation week's low. If that were to happen again now, that's currently about 60K. So you get a red candle down. In fact, it sets a new low below that, which just so happens to be, if I recall, I believe it's the 200-week. Yep. So until the indicator fires off, and this one in 2018, it took 2 weeks, which is why I said it could be the 3rd week, not necessarily 2 weeks from today, but could be 3 weeks. The indicator fires off on the 2nd red candle, right at the 200-week simple moving average. That's the SMA. And then after that, what happens? Let's go to the daily. We're going to go to the daily, and we're looking for what happens from December 10th onwards. And I still don't have the option on. So let's go back to December 10th, 2018. Here we are. I'll put on the EMA. And what do you know? So here's the indicator firing off on that final week, final red week. And then boom, straight up. And Bitcoin would continue straight up to, this is the kind of level where, I would look to sort of maybe take profits on my holdings at this point, because just for the very short term, I'm talking very, very short term stuff, guys. Because Bitcoin kind of gets within about, I should do this from the other direction, actually. It starts to get within 5% of the 50-day, the EMA, and you'll see why that matters in a second. With this maturing market, and it gets pretty close to the 50, comes back down, tests the 20, goes back up to the 50, but the 50 has now lowered, of course, over time, to the point where if you had just sort of taken profits here when it got pretty close, this one was within 2%, 3% of the 50-day EMA. If you had just taken profits here, you would have had actually a little bit more money, but it's pretty much the same level. That being said, we're back in the nitty-gritty. Ultimately, Bitcoin left the indicator behind and went to the 50-day. We'll just leave it at that. And then moving quickly, we're not going to touch on COVID. It was a completely different structure. I'll tell you what, if the indicator were to fire, because the indicator in every other bear market has fired off on a red week, if the indicator fires off on this upcoming green week, maybe I have to revisit this video. But for now, that's not the structure. It's not the shape. And I don't think the indicator with the current rate of change is moving fast enough to put in... I don't see the rate of change as I've been calculating it to be fast enough to ring up on this very next green week. If it does, I'll update the video. For now, let's go to 2022. Here's the bear market bottom. Does this shape look familiar, guys? Again, Bitcoin loses, actually, this is more 2014 in the lead up to the capitulation. Bitcoin lost the 100-week EMA, would plunge downwards, and then has its capitulation week. Now, on this one, the indicator, this was such a decline in the modern day that the indicator fired off on the capitulation week. So which would tell you that the low's in. And look, the low was in for quite a while. The low was 17.6. And after that is where we get that sort of upward move, the living cat bounce, the LCB, as I'm going to call it from here on out. So capitulation week. Get the indicator, get the wick, and I think the week even touched on the. Oh, it went below. So it touched and went below the 200-week SMA. So that's also something to keep in mind for a second, or in a second. But here we go, marching forward. We get red capitulation wick, green follow-up week, and again, in this more mature crypto market, it just puts in kind of a spinning top. Same thing as 2018. Green week, followed by red week. But now the indicator's in. Yeah, the indicator already fired off, and it's already touched the 200-week SMA. There was no reason for this to go any lower than the capitulation week's low, and it didn't. There was one more red week, and then it was off to the races into the living cat bounce. And here we go, back to the daily. Let's see what happens. This is 2 weeks off of the indicator, if my photographic memory is correct. So here is indicator week. Here's the green week, and then here's the red week. So this is the final red week. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday was a little bit green, and then what does Bitcoin do? It never goes back below this low, and it makes its journey to the 50-day. And you could, based on your risk appetite, you could maybe exit on the first touch of the 50, but it also follows 2018 in that it goes to the 50, tests the 20-day EMA, or it goes a little bit under it, morning stars out of it, and then goes back to the 50 again. And, again, based on your risk appetite, you could probably exit anywhere, here would be fine because ultimately it's only going to go a little bit higher from, for example, this very early high, which is only after that red week. This took 17 days. In a little over 2 weeks, Bitcoin went up 25%. And I'll show you what that does to Ethereum, our beloved actual asset, in a moment. But so in a little over 2 weeks, Bitcoin went up 25%. And then if you waited a little bit longer, it went up 29%. And then a little bit longer to the absolute limit, 30%. I think you're getting diminishing returns here personally. But it's something to look for. The point is, it went to the 50-day EMA, tested the 20-day EMA, and then went back to the 50-day EMA. And at any point in here, you're making pretty fine profits, and it's diminishing returns if you wait for what a final touch that may or may not come. After that, it goes down into the back half of winter, and we'll talk about what happened. Oh, and then it did double bottom in 2022. Like, I'm not trying to hide that. It absolutely double bottomed, but as I've said, from the capitulation, as I've said on the Discord, in none of these years, and I measured it, I'm not going to go back and measure it again. You can take my word for it or not. The double bottom, whether it's 2014, 2018, 2022, whether or not they had a double bottom or not, the double bottom never goes below, here it was, 11.7%, from the absolute bottom of the wick. It never goes more than that. It's like 10 or 12%, even in the absolute worst cases of a double bottom. So I would feel pretty confident saying, the initial bottom is in on this indicator, or 10% more to go at some point in the year. And if you are going to get your knickers in a bunch over 10% further drawdown, then you do you. I'm personally fine with that. And that's why I'm also calling this is, I keep saying the initial bottom, in the Discord. I'm calling the initial bottom upon this indicator. Could there be a double bottom? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it has never gone more than 10 or 12% down. And that would be a great buying opportunity when we come to our next video about the potential long. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about what happens after these indicators. Bitcoin goes to the 50. In early years, it went to the 100. I'm not expecting that. But it does go to the 50. And based on your risk appetite, you can scale out at that point. So what could that possibly look like? Let's roll forward a week. I even put a little zone here because the touch on the 50-day, I did some calculations behind the scenes. The second touch of the 50-day has happened between day 30 and 41 each time. It's kind of a wide zone, and we're extrapolating, but hey, we're having fun with it. So after this move completes, this is the end of the capitulation week. I'm recording this on Sunday. And so, you got a green week, so that'll take us to Monday the 16th would be the start of the red week. That's the earliest it can fire off, the indicator. And so after that, in theory, Monday, February 23rd could be the start of the living cat bounce, the LCB. in which case it would be 16 days to our zone. Keep in mind, 2022, it only took 17 days. So yeah, 16 days to the zone, about 26 days to the end of the zone. And this is based on real napkin math, guys. Like this zone here is not part of like the main theme of this video, which is what's about to happen. This is me just having fun, sort of guessing. I think the touch on the 50-day will occur in here. And then I did even further napkin. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to guess where the 50-day is going to be because it's dropping fast now, 500 a day. But it's as Bitcoin completes this move and puts in a green week this week, this thing's going to, it's going to slope down. I would guess based on this like massive like support level that was the breakdown, if I were to really just have total speculation, oh boy, projected bottom date. Remember when I did that, Discord? That one's not going to hold. That was based on a different calculation, so it's fine. I would guess that this zone probably, I think the 50-day could maybe slope out into 81K and form this zone. Maybe call this, so from the breakdown zone to this breakdown zone, which was of course 78K. We talked about what would happen there in the Discord. So maybe call it 78K to 81K. I'm going to copy this. This is like 12 levels of inception extrapolation. So like none of this is, I don't want to be held accountable for these, but I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to do 78K to 81K, and I'm going to make this the actual touch zone. All right, let's make this a different color. Magenta. So this is the timing window. This is the support band. This is like the window plus support band. I'm creating this now just to see if it hits because it'll be fun. Okay. Oh, right. And here's my little note about, you can see how to sell the Bitcoin, to remind myself how to sell the Bitcoin 50-day EMA. Breaks above, retest the 20-day, and then sell the next touch of 50. I reserve the right to sell on the first touch of the 50 if it gets there really fast. So, whatever I want to do. Okay. Now, we've talked about Bitcoin. We've talked about the shape of this week. It just keeps repeating, guys. And as I've told you this entire bear market, stop fighting the chart. It just keeps happening. Assign whatever narrative you want to it. The same thing happened this bear market as in 22, as in 18, as in 14. It just keeps happening. It should be. That doesn't mean it will always happen, but you have to entertain it as the base case. Why wouldn't you? What are the levels of invalidation? I don't know. Bitcoin plunging back below. Oh, that reminds me. I should talk about the 200-week here because Bitcoin has not hit the 200-week SMA. This white line, because I keep it as a horizontal line and I update it each week in case I can't see it on a certain time frame. So like the 200-week EMA is at 58.1 and it'll rise up to, by the time of this indicator firing off, it should be around 58.3. Whatever, I'm not going to move it. We're grasping at straws here. But when, when Bitcoin has this shape, which is to say in the modern era, when it only puts in these like spinning tops green weeks. So here's 2018. It had yet to, we knew it was going to go down again. We had no idea it was going to go down below the wick necessarily, but it went right to the 200 week. So not only do we get the capitulation wick and the indicator and the red week, but it also touched the 200 week. If we go forward to 2022, we had the capitulation wick. We had a spinning top in a more mature crypto market, and it didn't go to the 200-week SMA, which is up here. It had already crossed it. So it's almost like, at least in 2 cycles, 3 things had to come to pass. You had to have the spinning top, green week. You had to have touched the 200-week SMA at some point, whether it was on the capitulation or after. And then, of course, you had to have the indicator fire off. So why does that make me a little... why things, we don't know what's going to happen, but if next week matches 2014 and it's a big old reversal week, green, and ends up, back up near like 77K, then it's very possible that the subsequent red week red weeks when the indicator fires off, it may only get back down to wherever the hell this capitulation week closes. I'm recording this as it hasn't closed yet. Right now it's at 71K. It's very possible that 71K forms the indicator bottom, and it doesn't go it doesn't go substantially lower than that. I think the max drawdown on those weeks, I already did the math. Again, this is something I'm not going to waste time. The max drawdown in the red week that doesn't set a new low is about 9%. So, 9% below here, 64.5, somewhere in that area, which was an important number if you were listening in Discord. So, again, if next week is a big old tweezer reversal, it's possible that the indicator red week is only going to get us down to 64.5, and then that's it. However, what are we going to have? We will have capitulation wick. We'll have very likely a green week next week. We'll have a red indicator week at some point in the next 3 weeks. So we'll have capitulation, an indicator. We will not have seen Bitcoin touch the 200-week SMA. Does it need to touch that? If this coming week is green but is only a spinning top, I think that first of all, we know that opens up the bottom of the capitulation wick for a touch, which is 60K. At that point, why not go down another $1,500 and touch the 200 week? So if this coming week is green and a spinning top, I would have to say we are exposed to 58.3, and that seems possible to me. I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so that covers Bitcoin, the shape of Bitcoin, the indicators, the bottom, what we're looking for in the coming weeks. Let's talk about what happens to Ethereum really fast. So I've translated as many of these same vertical indicators to the Ethereum chart as best I can. So here's 2022. Here's the capitulation wick on Bitcoin. It was also a capitulation wick on Ethereum, of course. There's the green week. There's the final red week. And then Bitcoin went up 25%, if you recall, from the bottom. Let me make sure I have these numbers right. Here's 2022. Yeah, 25%, about, 25, 30%. Ethereum, if you prepared for this move down here, would go up 90%. It goes up into the, oops, wrong button. It went up into the 20-week EMA, but a little bit more accurately, it went up into, I believe it was, it went well above the 100-day EMA. I would be out before this. I'm not going to wait for this crazy burst above. That's just not in my risk appetite. But definitely a touch on the 100-day EMA, I would start scaling out, because that's just it's crazy. And then we'll go back to 2018. Actually, let's look at what Bitcoin did in 2018. So on its rapid living cap bounce, Bitcoin went up again about 30% in 2018. Ethereum in 2018, on its living cap bounce from the final red week, went up a maximum of 90%. So, and then let's take a look at what that translates to on the EMA, the daily EMA. Once again, here's the living cap bounce from mid-December. Here's the 90% move, and it went to short of the 100, but pretty close. That's why if it touched, I would have to start scaling out. And if it gets within, we'd have to be doing calculations, but that's 5% from the 100-day. I think the 100-day EMA. I think that's a really great place to scale out. And again, if you do it on the first explosion wick above the 50, I mean, even this would have been, this is the top essentially of the living cap bounce. It just happens, 2 weeks earlier. So we're going to watch out for one of these too, because if this starts exploding above the 50, how high did this go above the 50? 20%. I'm gonna have to watch for that as a place to scale out as well, because I'd rather be done with the move earlier, if I can. So again, Ethereum, when Bitcoin puts in 25 or 30% living cap bounces, LCBs, Ethereum has been doing 90%. That doesn't mean I'm expecting 90% this go around because of diminishing returns across all assets, and especially crypto, especially given the funkiness of this cycle where it had, Bitcoin and Ethereum had the weakest dead cat bounce of the bear cycle ever, astonishingly. 7%. That's never happened. This isn't the subject of today's video, but dead cat bounces in the past were 30%, and Bitcoin has had a weaker and faster bear this time than ever before. So I'm not necessarily saying my base case is another 90% pump in Ethereum, but it's possible. And let me show you the last thing we're going to talk about today coming out of this living cat bounce setup is the ratio. How were those? What did those bounces look like in terms of the ratio in 2018 and 2022. And I think I translated them here. Yes. Okay. So here's actually let's go back to 2018. Hang on one second. Yeah, here's 2018. So here's the week of the start of the living cat bounce, and just look at the ratio. So in addition to Bitcoin going up, I mean, you kind of knew this by just deriving from what I just showed you on the ETH/USD chart that this must have been what happened. But like, look at these weeks the ratio puts in. So here's the indicator. This is where the indicator came in on the Bitcoin bottom, and then the ratio just 3 weeks of 60% pump. 3 weeks, 60% on the ratio. And then in I shouldn't have done that. 2022. Here's the indicator candle, and then in fact, because remember the indicator candle in 2022 was followed by a green week, so the ratio already started showing life in the green bounce week. But you know, let's be fair to it. Let's go all the way to the final red week, which the living cat bounce starts on July 4th of that year. It just does, and so ETH immediately it just goes up. In 3 weeks, it goes up 25%. In 4 weeks, it goes to a maximum of like 35%, somewhere around here. And then by the end of the living cat bounce, which is, it takes longer. It's about, this is 9 weeks, but it still goes 55%. So, we'll call it 55, 60% again. Why is that important? So it's very, very possible that ETH still outperforms an incredible amount on this upcoming bounce. 70, 80% compared to Bitcoin's 20%. Just throwing some numbers out there. Why is this important for the long term? Because I have been shouting, everything is turning around. It's been a long time coming. We have not been in an ETH bull market. We've been in a Bitcoin bull market. We have not been in an ETH bull market since 2017. It's just been down, 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 down. Here is the infamous call I made in April of 2025, where I said if ETH went down below a certain level, the calculation was, it basically hits it. I believe I calculated it pretty much to the T. I think it was like 0.175, and it hit 0.176. And I prematurely declared the death of the ratio. It hit my exact number and bounced, which technically makes me correct. I just shouldn't have declared it early. I should have waited for the damn close, the daily close, and I didn't. So that was a mistake. My mistake was in my saying it. My mistake was not in my technical analysis. Because I was right. It bounced off my exact number, and so far has left it behind. Look at the monthly chart here. This is, as of now, this is a higher low on the ratio monthly chart. And then, it put in a lower high, but you can see things are leveling out. It's above the RSI, the slow-moving average. This is not the subject of today's video, but I just want to show you very quickly, because if we go from where the ratio is now, it's on a breakdown. It's on honestly, the short indicator is like always wrong. At these lows. So what happens if ETH were to go 60% from here? You get back above this 60%. Hell, even 55%. Hell, even 50%. Hell, even I think 45%. Just 45% on this LCB gives you a higher high on the weekly. Huh? Can you imagine that? And then breaking out of this wedge and this downtrend and continuing what I have said is the very early days of the ratio bull market, meaning the ETH bull market. Here's the monthly, just to show you again, because it's going to be the same lineup. But if you go even 40%, just 40% extra on this LCB gives you a monthly higher high on the ratio and puts you above some really important things like the 100-month EMA. That's huge. Potentially even the 50-month. I don't know if that's going to come down enough, but I mean we're splitting hairs here. If this move plays out, this living cat bounce, there's money to be made in the short term for sure, but also it is setting up something we've been talking about for months now, which is, has it been a year? I don't think I started calling it that until after this breakout. I have to be fair. So months. We'll say 6, 7, maybe 8 months. The ratio bull is waking up. You can see things on the I don't have the Stoke indicator up right now, but things are turning around. It's putting in, you can see the reds are slowing down. It's putting in wicks. This is a potential bottoming candle. We'll see in 20 days. But if we get this move, if February closes green, whether it closes green against fiat or if it closes green against the ratio and puts in a higher high here, I mean, my God, guys, it's going to be really exciting. In any case, that is the end of this video. we're looking at the shape of the bear market bottom. May or may not come in to do a very, very brief video saying the indicator has fired off and to get ready. I might just put it in the Discord. In any case, I've been K-Brot. Thanks for watching.